Hey, it's Pete here with Philly Metro Commercial Real Estate. This video is about housing and apartment development and growth. In the past few years, new construction and apartment multi-unit development has not been keeping up with population growth. Now, a lot of people speculate the only reason why housing has been going up so high is a simple fact that the interest rates have been going very low. Even though that is one of the causes, that's very, very true. The other big factor is that the commercial real estate development for multi-units and the development for new construction is lagging drastically. And this lag is continuing to happen. And if there's not changes, it's expected to get worse. When coronavirus happened, the development became even slower. So commercial real estate for multi-tenants, new construction development, they're in high demand, not just in Pennsylvania and some of the areas I serve, but all over the United States. So if you need help buying or selling commercial real estate, multi-unit apartments or development, call me. It's Pete at 610-209-9219, 610-209-9219. And this video is maybe a shortened version or maybe the full version of the meeting. The meeting was probably around 3.5 hours. Let's check it out.
Okay, I'd like to welcome you all here on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Berks County. My name is Bill Litvin, and I'm a board member of the local league. The league is over 100 years old, and our mission throughout that time has been the same, in a nonpartisan method, to register voters and to educate voters, elected officials, and the public about important issues that are facing our country. With that in mind, the League is thrilled to partner with the many fine groups who are partnering with us tonight to put this event together. We must find ways to communicate to help improve our communities. We hope and trust that this event will be a step in that direction. Thanks again on behalf of the League.
Usually I say good evening, but this is kind of early to say good evening, so good afternoon. Welcome today to the Forum on Making Attractive, Sustainable Berks County Neighborhoods. I'm Paul Jansen. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Excellence in Local Government at Albright College. Some of you know my predecessor, John Kramer. He's in the back of the room. So he led CELG for the first 18 years, and it's hard to believe I've been here for 10 years now. So John, I wanted to call you out. I appreciate you being here. I want to thank all of you for attending this forum tonight. However, there's a special shout out due to a couple of people for this program. First, you just heard from Bill Litvin from the League of Women Voters, Berks County, and Karen Parrish. Karen, where are you sitting?
I'm right up here.
Karen and Bill, this forum would not have happened without their involvement. They took the lead, and they did all the organizational work and made sure the right people were involved to pull it together. So thank you both. Special thanks to both of you. Tonight, you'll be enjoying a meal from with the caterer for the college here at Albright College. If you have not had a meal here yet, you're in for a treat. In addition, BCTV is here tonight to video the presentations for rebroadcast, so thank you to BCTV. John Ferdina. Thank you, John. All right. However, none of these aspects of tonight's program would have occurred were it not for the funding efforts of the Reading Berks Association of Realtors and their association executive, Brittany Baker-Shore. Brittany, where are you at? We had another person involved with this, stepped away for another opportunity, and Brittany jumped in, and she jumped in with both feet and both arms and really kept the process going. So Brittany, thank you so much. Without you, we wouldn't be here tonight either. Also, on the invite, you saw there's a whole bunch of organizations that are sponsoring this tonight. Too many to go through, but just please recognize that all of them are a part of the success that we're going to have tonight, so I appreciate that. We're here tonight because Berks County is facing a challenge that some would call a crisis. The lack of available housing, whether it is affordable or premium or rental or ownership, is creating issues. Today, if you rent or own, the option of changing your residence is very limited. If you live outside the area and attempt to move to Berks County to relocate with a job relocation, the options and decisions also are very limited. In fact, this issue is creating very specific issues and problems for economic development and employment retention. It's on a scale whereby general economic development initiatives are being stifled. Tonight you'll hear from three perspectives of the housing in Berks County. What makes a viable neighborhood and how do you achieve it? You'll hear about the current status of housing across Berks County, and you'll hear about some steps that are being taken today in the city of Reading to address their burgeoning population. Yeah, I said that, burgeoning population. The city is really growing right now. The format is for each of our speakers to present. Following their presentation, we'll move to dinner and you will be called to the buffet line by our catering staff. As you wait for your turn to get your Albright dinner, you'll notice that there are 7 questions on your table. Also, one of your persons at your table is a moderator. We would like you to discuss the questions and have a scribe to write the salient points of the discussion, as at the end of dinner we will ask someone from your table to present on the important aspects of your discussion. I would ask that your scribe give me your copy of the notes as I move through the room so that we can develop a document for all of the thoughts to circulate through all of you here tonight. Once the tables are presented, we'll ask our panelists to comment on important aspects of your discussions, and then we'll wrap it up with a Q&A. On your tables, you'll find some regular line paper to write your questions on, and I will collect them and coalesce the questions in a streamlined manner. Thank you, and let's get on with our speakers. Our first speaker tonight is Kenan Rice, Dr. Kenan Rice. I've worked with Kenan on a number of issues here at Albright, and have learned that he is a real knowledge piece when it comes to our neighborhoods and how to make them a place that we want to be, and how to balance. As a municipal manager for 30 years, I never heard of anybody talk in terms of the balance and how to create that system that means your housing is serving your municipality correctly. So I'm really looking forward to Dr. Rice and his presentation. Thank you, Kenny.
Somehow these slides like to advance themselves. You've had a really good long look at my childhood home there on that first slide. It wasn't supposed to be held quite that long. But my parents oversaw the construction of my childhood home in northeastern Ohio. They were caught up in the romanticism of the 1970s and their young relationship and wanted to live close to the earth. And they loved the idea of converting a barn into a residential structure. But they looked around and they couldn't find anything that quite fit their needs, that fell in their price range. So, like I said, they decided to sort of design it and have it built themselves. They'd never done anything like this before. They're public school teachers and with no experience in anything about building a home whatsoever. And but this was their art project. It was an expression of themselves, and any problems that were there were less problems than they were just quirks that made it a little bit more lovable. You know, that's the way we think about our own art projects, right? So they couldn't see any problems with the home any more than they could see problems in each other with their young infatuation. But there were quirks in the home. Those places in the lawn that were always perpetually too wet to get a lawnmower over, those were just rain gardens. When it was discovered that the radiators in my childhood bedroom had never been connected to the furnace, I was told it was snuggly to sleep under a lot of blankets. And I'm sure that the smell of septic doesn't bother me quite as much as it does others, because that leaky septic tank was just the smell of springtime. Perhaps the most interesting quirk in the home, actually, was the location of the light switches. As much as my parents would have loved to have built the home entirely with their own hands, they had to rely on a lot of the heavy lifting with an all Amish construction crew. And when I say all Amish, I really mean all Amish, including the electrician. Now, to be fair, I don't know if it's because the electrician was Amish and didn't use electricity himself, or it's because my parents were overseeing this and never had, experience with building, or because the thing was built on the cheap, or because it was built in a hurry, as my parents, myself, my older brother, and 9/10 of my younger brother lived in an over-the-cab camper in a pickup truck in the dirt driveway, just hoping that before the third child was born, the house would be completed and we could move in. So you can imagine there was a clock on the completion of this thing. The light switches in the kitchen. You had to walk into the kitchen through the dark kitchen, unless you're coming in from the outside door. You had to walk through the dark kitchen to get the light switch. Same thing to leave the kitchen. You had to turn the lights off, walk all the way through the dark kitchen to leave. Dining room was similar, but the room that was most of note was my playroom, the basement. Now, because you've had all this time to study that picture of the back of my childhood home up there, you can actually see walkout basement, those doors there. There were light switches next to those walkout doors in the basement. The problem is that the stairwell was on the other side of the basement, and there were no light switches at the top or the bottom of the stairs. You had to go down the stairs, walk across the entire dark basement in order to get the light switch on the other side. Now, this was made all the more adventurous and challenging because one of my favorite childhood toys was Legos. Oh, I hear laughter. Some know where I'm going with this already. I love when I tell this story to my students, I always ask my students, I say, how many of you have ever stepped on a Lego before in bare feet or socked feet? And it's really humorous to see every hand go up in the room, because I'm fairly certain if I asked, how many of you ever stepped on a screw or a tack in bare feet, I'd probably get shrugs of shoulders saying, I don't know, probably at some point, but I don't remember it. But these things are deadly. They're mysterious. They're little landmines, and nobody really appreciates how much they hurt until they've experienced it. But I learned some self-defense against these colorful landmines. I learned that instead of leaving stray single Legos out on the floor, I could make sure they were all connected together into a spaceship, a castle, or a race car, or whatever you might have. One might think that if stepping on a single Lego was that painful, then stepping on a lot of Legos all at once would be a near fatal experience. But in fact, it was actually near the opposite. That by joining the individual Legos into a whole, it transformed the entire nature of the object. Lots of deadly things together somehow became not more deadly, but actually harmless. That house was the context for my childhood. It changed me and changed my family forever. The size and shape and feel of the rooms changed our daily habits, how we socialized, how we perceived our world. I can't sleep without at least 8 inches of blankets on me to this day. The nature of the individuals were transformed by being stuck to the side of that Lego house, and we would not have had the same nature as individual Legos. In the same way, the nature of the home would have been much different if it were not for the Lego street it was stuck to, or the Lego community of Chardon, or the Lego creation that was Geauga County, Ohio. So there are 2 lessons to be taken from this long introductory story. The one is that the nature of the person or thing depends on the context in which it's embedded. This first lesson is pretty straightforward. A single Lego can take on a lot of different forms depending on what it's attached to. In one creation, it might be the leg of a robot. In another, a piece of a castle wall. In a third, the same Lego might be the hood of a car. Like human beings, its nature depends very much on its surrounding context. The second lesson might take a little bit more explanation. Aggregates take on properties sui generis. Now, I'm always tempted to define sui generis, that Latin term there, as more than the sum of its parts, but that's not quite right. It's a little bit more general than that. We all know that phrase, something is more than the sum of its parts. However, it's probably more accurate to say that it's different from the sum of its parts. That when you put the parts together, you have a thing of its own kind. It becomes a class of its own. The nature of the whole is not necessarily the same as the nature of the parts that make it up. It's not just Legos. Lots of things work this way when we look for them. Chocolate cakes and loaves of bread do not strongly resemble any of the ingredients that make them up. They don't taste a little bit like oil, a little bit like yeast, a little bit like eggs. No, they become an entirely new thing. The same thing with those Olympic basketball teams, somehow are never quite as good as the NBA stars that make them up if we were to accumulate all of that talent. Family vacations might be a string of mildly annoying events, but somehow at the end of the family vacation, it's the highlight of the year. And that joke book, that fish-themed riddle book, that first fish-themed riddle is funny, but 12 jokes later, it's not 12 times more humorous, but in fact has become something quite painful. We had to hide that joke book from my youngest until he's old enough to use it responsibly. Just like a community might be made up of all healthy, affluent households, but the community itself could still be dysfunctional and financially burdened. Or vice versa, sometimes the households might be individually struggling, but they make for a strong community together because they complement each other well. Let's return to that first lesson for a second about those individuals being transformed. I'm not sure if you can think of, I am sure that you can think of numerous examples of how your homes have shaped you and your loved ones. But having a place of one's own has the potential to influence far more than how much one objects to the smell of septic or how many blankets one has to pile on their bed. Even while statistically controlling for other sources of difference between homeowners and renters, homeowners' children are more likely to graduate from high school and pursue higher education, have improved math and reading scores, and reduced behavioral issues. Rates of home ownership are associated with lower levels of crime in an area and better kept structures. The income and welfare independence of homeowners seem to be enhanced. Housing stability seems to promote healthcare resources for families and lower rates of depression and socio-emotional challenges. Greater quality housing is associated with nearly every positive health outcome that one can imagine. I compiled a big long list of literature. I started making a list here, and I literally said, there's just too many. The positive health outcomes, I'll just say if they can imagine it, it's probably enhanced by home ownership. Homeowners contribute as citizens in ways that cannot be attributed similarly to similarly situated renters. Homeowners are about 10% more likely to know their U.S. congressperson by name, 9% more likely to know the identity of their school board chair, 15% more likely to vote in local elections, 6% more likely to work to solve local problems, and they report attending and contributing to religious organizations more regularly than comparable renters. Again, even with statistical controls in place, it really seems to be homeowning itself that raises the elevation of all those things. And of course, you can use your imagination. That's just a sample. It's representative of a larger mindset that is likely contributing to all sorts of small micro decisions in people's lives. Affordable housing challenges may impact a householder's budget, leaving less to pay for food, utilities, transportation to work, health, and child care expenditures. All things that I think we probably would benefit from people investing in for themselves. It results in reduced savings for emergencies, retirement, and other opportunities, such as pursuing higher education or starting a small business. Again, greater goods for the larger society when individuals achieve those things. The benefits to the larger communities of having citizens in affordable housing is tremendous, or rather the cost of not having these things could also be categorized as tremendous. Either way one looks at the equation for public investment in affordable housing is an interesting one. I want to pause on there, ask you to contemplate that sentence. What is the public investment in getting people into homes? There's payoff for more than just the homeowner when you get an individual into a home that not only that they might own, but also that they can live in with financial security. There's a need for housing at every level. The recent spike in housing costs has been well rehearsed in the popular media. CoreLogic, that L is supposed to be capitalized there, and CoreLogic I noted after I submitted my presentation. CoreLogic, a data analytics and consumer reporting agency specializing in real estate, reports a 20% increase in U.S. home values in 2021. New data from the Wall Street Journal and Zillow has found that an estimate of the value of a typical home in the U.S. Called the Home Value Index increased by $52,000, nearly $53,000 in 2021 alone. This makes for the real possibility, I'm going to pause here again for emphasis, this makes for the real possibility that many homeowners may have earned more this past year because of increased equity in the home they own than their entire pre-tax income. But if one does not already own a home, it's hard to save up to buy one when home values are increasing each year by a factor of more than one's entire income. You could save every penny and you still have lost ground towards affording that home. But the current level of need for housing have existed well before this current spike that we've been in that has been so pronounced. Fewer new homes were built in the decade following the 2008 housing bubble collapse than in any decade since the 1960s. Again, think about that statement. The population is much greater, but just as a raw count still, so it's even bigger than it sounds like in terms of how few homes were built. This constrained housing supply and failing to keep pace with the demand and housing formation. This mismatch between housing supply and housing demand grew during the pandemic, but is already quite sizable well before the pandemic and the supply chain issues and whatnot came about. Moody's Analytics estimates the shortfall in housing supply is more than 1.5 million homes nationwide. But that number, I know we have trouble contemplating numbers as big as 1 million, right? Like anything more than 1 million doesn't even matter anymore. Freddie Mac's chief economist estimated the shortfall at 2.5 million in 2018 and up to 3.8 million by spring of 2021. In March of 2022, NPR ran a story that said that the bottom fell out of the home building business following the housing bubble, causing many home builders to close their doors and tradespeople to seek other lines of work. So even as the economics of home building began to look rosier in more recent times, the depleted workforces kept building in a slump. Builders for many years just weren't building enough to keep up with demand, and then the pandemic and the current labor shortage exacerbated a problem that could probably already be described as in a state of crisis. There's a need for additional housing at every level of analysis. Globally, I'm not going to give you numbers, but globally, one only needs to look at, glance at headlines to hear about refugees from Ukraine in the millions, from Syria in the millions, from climate change casualties all over the world, not to mention the substandard housing that is so common throughout the global South. Nationally, we've already covered a lot of those numbers. Locally, Berks County realtors tell us that 5 years ago there were 846 homes on the market at the end of March. Well, this year there were only 277. The median sales price in March of 2017 was $153,000 in Berks County, compared to $230,000 this current March. Given demand for housing at the local, national, and global levels, it's almost impossible to overbuild. If you build it, they will come. Nonetheless, building additional housing is not always welcome in communities. I'm not sure I am sure, that's the second time I've done that, I am sure that you're all familiar with the acronym NIMBY, not in my backyard. Things that smell bad, make noise, release toxins, and people who scare others or seem undesirable end up concentrated in one place. Because when every community is saying, not in my backyard, these things usually end up in the community that's least able to say no, that's least able to be exclusionary. This creates a lack of balance for those communities, as they're forced to play the role of hosting these features for every other community. Additional housing sometimes ends up grouped with these other undesirables, as it eliminates agricultural space, cuts back on green spaces, adds density. However, the greatest collective benefit may occur from all communities sharing in the provision of affordable housing. Affordable housing serves the ecosystem the best when it's provided where it is currently scarcest, not where communities are least able to veto it. Indeed, there's copious research showing sui generis effects when low-income people are concentrated in the same place. Think about the meaning of that phrase there. You get a lot of low-income people in one place. It's not an additive effect. It's something of its own nature. The experience of raising a family in poverty is far different in a neighborhood where everyone else is privileged than the experience of raising a family in poverty in a neighborhood where everyone else shares your same fate. And in the case of concentrated social ills, the new sui generis is even more troubled than the parts that make it up. Oh, I think I skipped a slide there. Advance 2. Excuse me. Concentrations of low-income and unemployed individuals tend to have an influence on crime above and beyond an additive effect. That is, the total contribution to street crime by such individuals is much higher when they're economically segregated away from others than when they are different economic situations in economic integration. Whether one endorses the contact hypothesis, the visibility discrimination hypothesis, power theory, or realistic group conflict theory, economic segregation appears to increase prejudice and discrimination between groups. Yeah, there'll be a quiz afterwards. I want you to define all those theories for me. The concentration of low-income populations, all within a distinct community, promote physical and psychological withdrawal from a community as neighbors begin to see each other as threats rather than allies. This withdrawal limits the time residents spend outdoors, actual data, the investment they make in local community friendships and relationships. Even in those who have personal attributes who would otherwise be associated with high levels of community involvement, show little formal or informal involvement when they are situated in low-income neighborhoods with concentrated social ills. The concentration of social maladies means that behaviors not tolerated in other settings become less fervently condemned. And social ills may be learned to be perceived as more normative. This includes such things, again, documented here with data, as low school performance, school dropout, even pregnancy. I want to remind everybody here, the list I'm ticking through, this is not additive. Everything on this list is above and beyond extra effect when you get things concentrated in a single area. The loss of tax base, public involvement, and social capital means that public services and resources tend to withdraw from areas with concentrated social ills. This includes the quality of public education, law enforcement, emergency management, code enforcement, medical services, parks, recreation, etc. Actually, I had one more. I advanced my slide a little too quickly. The concentration of reduced spending capacity also results in urban deserts. Think about it. If you have economic integration across the map, there's no special depletion of resources in any one place. When you concentrate that reduced spending capacity, you create situations in which there's much more likely to be empty buildings, vacant lots, boarded up ruins, while the goods and services taken for granted by much of America are simply unavailable. They're simply absent within those communities. Now, there's one particular study that I found especially salient on the power of supporting affordable housing I wanted to detail here. And that's the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Moving to Opportunity experiment. This extraordinary study randomly assigned, think about what this would have been taken. They randomly assigned 4,600 different families who all had young children and were all living in high poverty public housing. They randomly assigned them to 5 groups. This is across 5 major American cities. The first group received traditional Section 8 housing vouchers without restrictions, and they generally stayed where they were after receiving this aid. The second group was given the same housing vouchers, but they were given restrictions to go with those housing vouchers. They could only use the voucher. They had the option of staying where they were, but they could only use this voucher if they moved to a neighborhood with 10% less poverty within that neighborhood. By the data of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The third group was simply provided ordinary kinds of aid but no housing vouchers. All 3 groups of families were then followed for the next 15 years on a large number of dimensions to see how this aid structure ended up affecting them. So what are the results from that study? I've got MTO here, moving to opportunity. Moving to opportunity improved physical health for that group 2, those folks that were, if you will, strong-armed to move to a low-poverty community. Moving to opportunity improved mental health in areas such as depression and psychological distress. Moving to opportunity showed large declines in violent crime arrest and significant declines in property offenses. This was especially true of the children in those families in those 15 years that they moved through teenagehood and into adulthood, but also the adults within the homes. And the children in group 2 were much more likely to attend college, and they earned an average of this is a projected average. They earned a projected average of $302,000 more over their lifetimes. Again, you talk about a return on investment on those housing vouchers. To reiterate my point, affordable housing matters, but the greatest good is accomplished when it is located where the community when it is not located where the community is least able to resist new construction, but where it is most needed. The scholarly literature on neighborhoods and communities often references human ecosystems. If you've never thought about humans in an ecosystem with all our different things that we have, it's an interesting a metaphor to explore for the first time. But this natural world metaphor often works well to understand the power of human environments. Some ecosystems are more healthy and prosperous than others, but to achieve that prosperity, it truly has to be a system. It has to have all the right parts in all the right ratios in balance with each other. Every human community needs places to work and produce, places to recreate, places to accommodate things that are loud or smelly or toxic, places to support children, places for health care, places to live and raise families. If any of these elements fail to be accounted for, the quality of life diminishes. Natural ecosystems tend to be self-correcting in this way. If at one end of the forest you have lots of squirrels and not very many foxes, it'll self-correct. Those foxes will find their dinners easily, then they'll never be hungry, they'll have lots of kits who will in turn grow up to be healthy themselves, and eventually you'll start to see fewer squirrels. Just the opposite will happen to the other end of the forest if there's lots of foxes and very few squirrels. Eventually, some of those foxes will move on or they'll starve. But humans are not quite like this. Humans have some things that foxes and squirrels don't have. And we're not talking about opposable thumbs here. In fact, we are instead talking about things such as prejudices, status competitions, and politics. These things tend to move our communities out of balance, and we even strive for intentional imbalance to the greatest of extremes in many cases. When one community insists on excluding some of these elements, it can only be sustained by exploiting surrounding communities to host them. Well, my points earlier about the sui generis effects from the concentration of social ills should make it clear this approach does not necessarily create the greatest good for the greatest number of people. However, what it does do is create interesting questions about whether a community is balanced. Not all communities need their own landfill. They don't all need their own hospital. They don't all need their own prison. But when it comes to affordable housing, an argument can be made that the healthiest regions are those where economic integration is greatest and every community supplies their share. Claiming one has no need for more affordable housing rings hollow if one is importing their workforce from surrounding communities. We're all shaped by the places we live, and probably in more profound ways than that Lego-shaped impression on the bottom of one's foot. Educators can't help students reach their full potential unless students live in stable, affordable homes. Physicians can't heal patients when those patients are experiencing perpetual stress. Law enforcement can't keep us safe when housing pressures are criminogenic. And families can't improve their financial status when housing costs are eating up all of their income. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is David Hunter. He is the Executive Director for the Berks County Planning Commission. Dave arrived in Berks County through the city of Reading, was there for a couple of I guess a little over a year, and then he moved on to become the director for the county. Prior to that, he did a lot of work in Northern Virginia, and I know this because my father was in the Marine Corps and I was born in Quantico, and he was in the planning department in Stafford County, which is where Quantico is. So, David, without further ado, come on up.
Everyone, I'm going to get on the microphone, but we're going to start off with the quiz. Yeah, I know you were loving that, right? We have to have a planning acronym quiz, okay? Ready? Oh, come on. Okay. Are you ready? Yeah. All right, it's easy quiz. What does NIMBY stand for? N-I-M-B-Y. Not in my backyard. I was easy. All right. Ready for this one? N-I-M-B-Y. Not in my election. Yeah, don't do that. Did I spell that right? Don't fact it. All right, here's the last one. Paul is getting ready to call up my side here. That didn't ask me to do that. Banana. Banana. The fruit.
Just say it.
Banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. Okay? We don't have folks that are bananas in here, do we? All right, we're all set. All right, I have to speak into the microphone, so I'm going to try to be good. Again, I come to you from Northern Virginia, and Dorothy, I think we're not in Kansas anymore, but I am loving my job. Remember, my staff is here. I've made many friends in Reading and Berks County. And so when you hit your niche, you know it. And I'm enjoying all of the experience I've had, and I could bring that to bear here in Berks County. So I want to start off by talking about planning. You passed the quiz on the acronyms, right? Great job. All right, but what is planning? I think we just need to start off with that and then we'll go on. But planning can be three things. It can be proscriptive, prescriptive, or adaptive. All right, now planners have made some mistakes. Yes, it's true. Planners have made some mistakes in that we've done things that we think are best for the neighborhood, the city, the group, and we know better than the neighborhood because we're the planner, right? We have the degrees, we took the classes, we have the ICMA textbook on planning. John, you know about that, you know, it's just about this wide and it's all about planning. Everything you wanted to know about planning, but we're afraid to ask. So we took all those classes, but what happens is Euclidean zoning, which was good at the time. Euclidean zoning said, the case was Euclid versus a town, and they debated whether or not industrial should be next to residential, should be next to retail. Well, when you have smokestack industry, a factory really shouldn't be next to single-family apartments or residential. It really shouldn't be, especially old-fashioned smokestack industry, right? So Euclidean zoning was good at the time, all right? So that was proscriptive. We're looking ahead. Prescriptive, well, we know better than you because we're the planner. We know you better. So we're going to tell you what to do. That led to model cities. That led to urban renewal. That led to bulldozing entire neighborhoods. And those citizens, those families, those communities were decimated. And so how is that better than what they had before? Well, it's slum clearance. We got to do that. One good idea. All right. So we've come to, and you all are warming my heart because this is what we've come to do. We've come to collaborate. We have to work together. You've heard the phrase, better together, right? We are better together, so we have to work together. I'm going to cheat a little bit and skip ahead to the last test, which is on your desk. We're going to talk about joint plans, or you're going to talk about joint plans. Why joint plans? Why should communities come together to do a joint plan? Because we must collaborate. Think about the Lego piece. Thank you, my esteemed colleague from Albright. Stole all my thunder for all the details and all the facts, so I'll skip over some of that. But who didn't love Legos, right? All planners had to love Legos, right? We got to grad school and like, you played with Legos too? Whoa, I did too, right? We just joked about Legos because we like to build from nothing, all right? And so when we come together and we deal with adaptive planning, we have to look at what's best. Highest and best use. That's a term that planners use. What is the highest and best use for a property, for an area? That is what we have to do together because unfortunately, one group doesn't know better than another group. It's just impossible. It never worked at the time, and so we have to be collaborative. Okay, I want to put a plug in for the Smart Growth Alliance. How many have heard of the Smart Growth Alliance? Hey, ho. Hey, oh, it's a tough crowd. Try to loosen you up for Jamal, all right? So pretty soon we're going to do the wave, all right? So just spoiler alert, the wave, you go this way, and you go this way, all right? Any sports fans in here? Come on. A friend of mine is at the Fighting Fields game. I said, really? Really? You're going to the Fighting Fields game and not coming to listen to me? That's okay. My feelings aren't hurt. All right, so we're going to do the wave later on. Smart Growth Analysis, or Smart Growth Alliance rather, we come together quarterly and we talk about issues that are common to all the communities in Berks County. Really quick, what makes a good community good? Okay, what makes a good community good? And again, we could debate these or go through them, but the one I want to focus on, all right, is on this page, and that is, you have to have, number 8, you have to have interested, strong citizens and stakeholders. Leaders that are willing to say, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. Okay? I wonder if we have any of those in here. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. In case you missed it, you need strong citizens that say, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. That makes a strong and viable community. All right, I'm stealing this from a dear friend of mine. He's up into better things, but my dear friend from our bar did a market analysis. And just really quick, again, my esteemed colleague gave you numbers, but in this analysis, we look at the median income for Berks County, $67,708. And as our parents told us, you never compare children, ever, unless they're counties. And so we're going to compare tonight. We're going to compare the counties that are on the screen. And then you can see the median income for Berks County is not as high as some of our sister counties. And there are reasons for that. All right, but we're going to get into the fact that when you talk about housing, housing demand is based on housing choice. All right, where do you live? You live where you want to live, for the most part. Housing choice is based on income. Period, end of discussion. All right? Any New York lovers in here? I know this is Berks County, but all right. We have 1, 2, all right. I love New York, right? I'm a county guy now. I love driving through the country, but I'm a city guy too. And you have to understand that the Lower East Side of Manhattan is different from the Upper East Side, right? Somebody said totally. Lower East Side is different than Upper East Side. Remember the Jeffersons, right? Come on, guys, come on, lighten up a little bit, right? Moving on up to the what? East Side,
86th Street.
right? To a deluxe apartment in the sky.
Across the street from Central Park.
All right, so if the Lower East Side is different from the Upper East Side, it's by choice. Because the people that live on the Upper East Side don't want to live on the Lower East Side. Likewise, the people that live on 5th Avenue do not want to live on 12th Avenue. I learned that a long time ago. I love New York, so I went to New York, and I stayed in a hotel on 8th Avenue. Woo! 8th Avenue is not Lexington Avenue. Trust me, all right? It's not. And if you have the choice, you're going to stay in a hotel on Lex or Madison, not 12th. We got off Penn Station. We took the train, my son was little, and we got off Penn Station, and Laura said, well, where's the hotel? And she's thinking it's a really nice place, you know, like, woo! Babe, we're not that way, we're this way, right? Because of choice, and it was dictated by how much we could afford. And so this is significant. Again, if you're reading these, I hope I'm on the right slide, but I'm trying to get through this quickly. I don't want to eat up Jamal's time, but this slide should say, it talks about homeownership and homeowners who are cost burdened. Is that where we are? I guess I should put on my glasses.
Too far.
The last slide, previous slide.
Thank you. Yep. Yes, there we go. Cost burden. Anyone heard that term? Cost burdened. Cost burdened. All right? They told me a long, long time ago, and it was a long time ago in grad school, that if you pay more than 33% of your income for your housing, you are cost burdened. 33%. You shouldn't pay more than 33% of your income for your housing. And statistics now tell us that almost a quarter of homeowners are cost burdened. 42% of renters, think about that for a minute, are cost burdened. And I dare say that these numbers are pre-COVID. Because COVID has what? Changed everything. Everything. And so it is not sustainable to have renters live in cost burden conditions. It's not sustainable for homeowners to live in cost burden conditions. And so right now, technically, what's the term? The term is not politically correct anymore. We're not really supposed to say low-income housing. That is a no-no, all right? So a few things you're gonna learn tonight. You learn banana, you're gonna learn not to say low-income housing, right? Right. What we need to say is we need to talk about affordable housing based on that 33% metric, okay? Because you need money to spend other than on a roof over your head. And many people that I know are paying way more than they should for their housing. The median income in Berks County, median home value in Berks County is 188. I'm just flipping through this really quick, 188, 100. Historically, our inventory is low. Our bar would tell you that. My distinguished colleague told us that. Inventory for housing is low locally, it's low regionally, it's low nationally. We can debate why. We don't have time to debate that. We're here to talk about how can we fix it, okay? That's what we want to do tonight. What can we do to bridge the gap? All right, I'm going to move on. This is a slide on income based on industry type. Again, you can live where you want to live as long as you can pay the rent, okay? And that sounds cold, but it's a cold hard fact. All right, these are some, again, slides that I was given by Arbor for what's being sold in our region. Again, dare say these are pre-COVID numbers. Again, altogether, COVID changed everything. All right, this is the one that I think is instructive. New construction listings, 2018 to 2020. This is a bar graph. We all learned that in school, right? Well, what's the trend, right? Social media is all about trends. What's the bar graph? Well, the trend is, are we decreasing or increasing new construction listings? Decreasing. We are woefully lacking in new construction. All right, so someone told me, David, there is no housing crisis. There's no housing crisis. Okay, well, let's just fact check that statement. All right, so we have here median housing prices across the U.S. first quarter 2020, 329, first quarter 2022, 428. Again, my esteemed colleague already talked about the increase in housing prices. These are crazy numbers. These are numbers that, yeah, we want there to be increased value in our housing. But who can keep up with this? All right, so just if you get the PowerPoint and you want to read a lot like I like to do, here is a report that I thought was instructive. It's infrastructure, social and economic benefits of building more housing. There is no benefit to building less housing. There's a benefit to building more housing. All right, this I think is on some tables. Again, we're looking at basically pre-COVID and post-COVID. So this is market activity, 2019, quarter one. You can see the number of sales, homes for sales. Again, this number was this number in 2019. We'll look at it just a few months ago. All right, 200, I think I'm a couple off from the professor. That's not enough stock. And so what happens, who got an A in economics? One person, two. I did not, right? Did not. Thankfully, my professor, Marie Howland, love her to this day, was gracious to me and she got me through economics. Woo! Because it really isn't that hard to understand supply and demand, right? Took me a while, but I got it, finally. But supply and demand is if you don't have enough demand, then the supply, right, the price goes down. If you have a lot of demand and no supply, what happens? The price goes up. So we have a supply and demand problem. Putting in a plug for my supervisor, Pam Shop-Mennett, has done a great job working on Imagine Berks, the Strategic Economic Development Action Plan for Berks County. Say that fast. It's coming out this month. Stay tuned. We'll be presenting to the county commissioners a strategy for economic development, including, wait for it, housing. All right, so the strategy is going to include these things, and we're just going to rush through them. It's going to promote awareness of housing, of the housing gap. Well, we got a housing gap, we talked about that. Promote development in accordance with smart growth principles, we talked about that. Review the assessment requirements to minimize carrying costs for developers. We need to talk about that, all right? And finally, highlight the work of existing quarters implementing smart growth principles. Want to shout out to my friends in the boroughs. We work with Main Street managers in the boroughs, and one of the principles of land use planning is that you need to put density where density is. Okay, that's a simpler way of saying it. Whereas you want to have apartments where other apartments are. You're going to have single family where other single family are. You don't really want to put an apartment building in the middle of a single family neighborhood. It's not a good idea. Never was, never will be. However, there are places where you can have mixed use development. We talked about the Euclidean zoning, separating the uses, right? Well, that's over, right? Separating the uses is over. It's like the bump. All right, everybody remember the 70s? Oh, Lord. No one grew up in the 70s? I did. Remember the bump? That dance, that silly dance where you just bumped hips and... It wasn't funny at the time, but my phrase is, that went out with the bump, all right? You don't need to separate uses anymore. We have towers in Arlington County. There are towers in Arlington County where there's a fire station and a school and a market rate and moderate rate apartments in one structure. Yes, a fire station. Yes, and a CVS, and a grocery store, and apartments in one structure. It's called mixed-use development. That's what we want, but you want to put that in the right place. You put that where other density is. And so the smart growth principles and the strategic action plan are all coming together, and we need to talk about that. So if you haven't heard about the economic development strategic plan, we haven't done our job, and I'm saying we as the planning office. So we want everyone to be a part of that implementation. All right, so I'm just going to touch on this and then we're just going to go forward. One of the principles that planning teaches is that you have wedges and corridors. All right, wedges and corridors. So the corridors in the county, and you know them, I learned them, tried to learn them quickly. You have 61 going up north, you have 183, you have 222 and 422. We have our corridors. Development should occur along our corridors. In the wedges, you have lower density development. And that's what this map is showing. You have the colors showing where there is sewer available, and we've done an analysis in the office where there are areas where there's additional capacity for sewer. So there's existing sewer, and then there's capacity for more building. And the green, those municipalities have indicated that they have more capacity for sewer, meaning they can take more development. The yellow, maybe the darker, the pink, red, not so much, and then we're still working on to some municipalities did not respond to us. So, sorry, I had the wrong slide up. That's why you were looking at me funny. That one, that's the one I was referring to, and you were like, what is he talking about? Okay, that's what I was talking about. Okay, so when you talk about development, you have to have infrastructure. Right, that's a planning term. You have to have the water, the sewer, the electricity, and guess what? Now you need broadband. Right, that's another discussion. All right, so getting through this, all right, housing, people want to work generally close to where they live. Generally. Not everyone wants to drive an hour and a half to work. All right. Paul mentioned that I lived in Northern Virginia, and my wife and I could not afford, right? Could not afford to live in the jurisdiction I worked in. I could not afford to live in Arlington County. I lived 30 miles south along I-95. Has anyone ever driven I-95 south on a Friday afternoon? No, wait a minute. Holiday Friday afternoon. Do I have any takers? See, that's why I'm here. I was done with 95. Done. Right? I wanted to live closer, but I couldn't afford to live closer. So there are people that want to live closer to where they work, and many, let's face it, we don't have to like warehouses. You don't have to like them. Right? They don't have to like you, but we got them. Right? And we're going to get more. Right? We're going to get more. That's coming from the planning director. So if we're going to get more and more people are going to work there, where are those people going to live? Along the corridors. That's where we should have increased density. It's a planning principle, right? It's not dictating, but you don't want to have a, all right, and I don't have time to go through it, but you don't want to have a brownfield development or a greenfield development, I'm sorry, off of one of the corridors. You don't want to expand density off of the corridors. And you can see those boxes are the areas where we have recommended for economic development. This is in the comp plan already, right? It's not anything that we haven't discussed. And so we have the corridors. 61 is the main one, north-south, and then you've got 422, 222, and not on 183 because there are not any industrial land, mostly on 183. It's not till you get up to 78. All right, winding down, we have locations of warehouse sites, and the location of future development should parallel where employment centers are. Again, planning principles, right? You don't want people driving, let's see, how long did it take me to get to work? It was a little over an hour to get from Quantico up to Arlington, but going home, Friday, rush hour, holiday, no. I took the VRE. We are going to have passenger rail back to Reading. Woohoo! Right, come on. We are going to have.
When?
We are going to have passenger rail to Reading after we finish studying it. And we do. We have to, there has to be a study. We're planners, come on. The first authority meeting, the authority has been established for Berks, Montgomery, and Chester. The first authority meeting is, get it right, July 6th, Wednesday, July 6th. That's the first authority meeting. Open meeting, it'll be the first meeting of the authority, so we look forward to that. I rode the passenger rail, the VRE, Virginia Rail Express, from Quantico. And so it was a longer commute, but I could sit and read and, study, whatever. The point is that going home, there were so many people on the train because they got sick of sitting in traffic that the conductor said, and I quote, all right, when I tell you to lean, all right, I told you we're going to do the lean, lean, everybody lean, all right? Everybody's not leaning, but that's okay, all right? Then the conductor said, when I say lean, you need to lean. I'm not making this up. There were so many people on the train to take the curve correctly, he told everyone on the car to lean. You're looking at me like I'm green and have tentacles. I'm not making this up because there were so many people trying to get south, and we don't have those issues, but we do have issues that we want to tackle. We want to have people live near where they work and not have to travel to Fredericksburg. You know how long it takes to go from the Union Station to Fredericksburg? Pack a lunch. It's a long ride, all right? We don't want that. All right, winding down, the housing data. So what's important to note, and I'm going to finish up for real, the last 10 years we have seen more apartment units built and apartment plans approved. And we've gone that trend. So not single family, but apartments have been the highest number of units that we've had, and I'm going to get to this explanation. So endorsed versus unendorsed, all right? So an endorsed residential unit, they're those that have been reviewed by the Berks County Planning Commission, and they are approved by a local municipality. So a total of 1,287 residential units were endorsed between 2015 and 2020. Of this number, half were apartments. And again, someone said, well, not in my backyard. I don't want apartments in my backyard, and they say some other things that I won't say. But we need affordable housing. And not everyone can afford a 5-acre lot, 2-acre lot. Not everyone can afford a 1/4-acre lot. Not everyone can afford that. So where are those people that work in our county going to live? That's the challenge. I'm going to end there. I want to give time to my esteemed colleague, Jamal. So we'll be talking at the tables. Thank you for your time.
Okay, our next speaker is Jamal Abdallah. He is the Director of Community Development for the City of Reading. Jamal is also a PE engineer, and he worked his way up through the municipal management process, and now he is working very hard in the City of Reading, doing some very big things. And so, without further ado, Jamal, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. A while ago, I learned that I should not stop in between the crowd and dinner. So for that particular reason, since we are running a little bit late, I am going to follow and heed the instructions that I've received from my good friend Andrew Weist. Make your presentation very short, not more than 2 minutes. And as a result of this, what I would like to do here is that we'll offer the presentation for you in a very accelerated way, but let me tell you about what the City of Reading is doing at this point in time. And actually what we are doing is quite a lot. Ever since the new administration took place, Mayor Moran, we were all, as a new staff coming in, building bridges and trying to expand the operations within the City of Reading so that we will be able to actually move forward with some of the things that you've heard from Dr. Rice, as well as what you've heard from my colleague who used to have my job, as a matter of fact, David Hunter in there. So the topic about marketing trends and how we will be able to develop this is very real. What we are facing in the City of Reading is not exactly any different than what we are seeing elsewhere in the United States altogether. But we are the NIMBY, and that is for a fact. Not too many people would like to come into the City of Reading, not too many people would like to invest within the City of Reading, and that is the challenge. So how we will be able to attract businesses, how would we be able to attract residential development in our area within the City of Reading itself. Back in 2020, late 2020, early 2021, the City of Reading conducted a study called the Downtown Plus, which was actually focused on the downtown area, but it did have a lot of parameters that covers multiple areas within the city itself and addresses many of the institutions that we are going to talk about them. And again, we have evaluated. If you see the slide, you will be able to see that we've evaluated the high residential to the low residential demands and how we will be able to increase that. The study itself called for that in the very first 10 years, between 2021 and 2030, actually there will be an increase in demand of about 1,000 to 1,500 apartments within the downtown area itself. I think we've shattered that limit at this point in time, and our statistics will show you this. But also, the study focused on residential area, not only residential but commercial, as well as hotel, and how we will be able to bridge from the 2030 to the 2041, and how that will be able to increase in there. So we've structured multiple deals or multiple areas in which we would like to actually help our developers to come in. And I'm very pleased to share with you, at this point in time, we have 6 new sizable developers from outside Berks County that are actually now investing within the city. That is something that is an accomplishment for us, simply because there were a lot of trepidations about why do we need to invest within the city. The city has a bad history. The city has a lot of corruptions. The city has poverty limit in there, and it does not help. It does not help when we are symbolized as I think the 4th poorest city in the nation itself. So we have developed multiple mechanisms, which my good friend David has spoken about some of them with regarding to the zoning and the planning and how we will be able to incentivize some of these things. So with all that being said, David, I took economics and I did pass it. So
Did you get an A?
I did actually. I did get an A, and I was an instructor to help my other colleagues to help them with that. So on that note, what I would like to say is that there is something for every developer that will come in. They need to look at certain specific criteria. Every developer has their own way of developing, and these developments, for instance, can be able to tell them whether this is a place for them to develop or not. The biggest important crucial factor here is the yield, and the yield is very simple in its magnitude. Simply, what it is that what you earn after you develop the property itself versus divided that by the total cost in there. If there is a positive value, then that will give you a promising factor. So most developers in our area would like to see anywhere between 5.5 to 7.5 to see how they can make the project run. And that is very critical, because you really need at a certain point in time to take off your hat as a planner, as a zoning officer, as a building inspector, and be in the thick talking business, talking dollar to the developers in order for them to see what you see and convince them that what is going on is very real and it is tangible. So with that, what we have done actually in the past few days, in the past, we've structured some of these tools, and some of these tools have been in existence, but we are revitalizing them. So we have the residential tax abatement program that will be actually helping developers to come in and benefit from that. The LERTA is another program that you probably heard about it, and that is the Local Economic Revitalization Tax Assistance Program, the neighborhood zoning, as well as the enterprise zone tax credit. But we are focusing also at this point in time on what's called the tax increment financing. And my sincere apologies if I'm going very fast, because Andrea there is telling me hurry up. So at any rate, these are some of the projects that we can talk about. One of the things that I would like to share with you very quickly is that in the last year, if I can share, yes, in the last year, property transfer taxes, and we monitor this very closely. Basically, there was 2,459 residential units sold in the city of Reading. 2,500 units. And if you monitor the statistics, and I do that for a living, basically the median went up. Not only this, but actually the value of the properties and the value of the family incomes increased itself. Let me elaborate on this. Developers would not be very much interested in coming into an area where, as Dave indicated, if the median, as it is in the city, about $26,000, that is not a go for them. So you need to inch up that, and you need to be able to create apartments that will hold a market rate that will actually attract families with higher income, and the circle goes around until we be able to generate and renovate the whole entire things. The city for the last year was very active. We've completed 27 land development projects, and we're going strong, and we continue to go strong. What does that mean? It means actually these are some of the projects that I would like to share with you. The Barley Square is 57 residential units, and let me say this, as the mayor always instructed us to say, the city is open for business, and we are open for all walks of life. We are actually willing to take projects as it is low to moderate income, affordable housing, whatever label you would like to put on there, market rate, as well as luxury apartments, student residential units, all of these things above. The Barley Square was actually completed in 2020, and it was booked completely 100% in January of 2021. We have the Buttonwood project that is actually a combination between a developer from Delaware as well as Habitat for Humanity that they are trying to establish there. The Delaware Valley redevelopment Delaware Valley company in there, actually they are putting 47 rental units, what you are seeing there, and actually at this point in time it has been completed. And then coming up very soon is the other side of the project itself, and that is by Habitat for Humanity for 11 homes, affordable homes that they will start breaking ground very soon in this. The Madison building, you probably have heard about this, been vacant for quite a while. There are 85 apartments that are going to be there. It will probably come debut sometimes at the end of June, where the floors are be completed, and it will be available for rent. They are also looking for putting a 5-star rooftop bar in there, which we have not seen the plans for that, but we were told that it is coming very soon for us. The same developer actually is working right now with us on the Berkshire building, and the Berkshire building is a student residential building, and that will cater for international students. What I'm trying to say to you, international families. So we are creating a traffic within downtown in which international families will be staying in there, and they are receiving education at College Town. Capitalizing on this energy itself actually led us to more of the same thing, and that is the medical art building. The medical art building will have about 35 market units there, and we understand that some of that could also be part of the student residential housing itself. Another building by the same developer, the Schumann Development Group, they are doing an amazing job in our community itself, and they are the very first and the strongest coming into the area altogether. Actually, they took the trust building, and that is going to be a mixed use. There will be offices, and there will be apartments, market rate apartments, as well as in the very first floor there will be a market for sandwiches, groceries, and many other varieties of that. So we are very excited in seeing this project coming to fruition, as a matter of fact. The Bear building recently been acquired, and they are planning, the developer is planning on putting 32 loft-style Manhattan loft-style apartments in there. We are working with the developer at this point in time to make sure that we facilitate for them all what they need in terms of zoning, land development, as well as building and trades. Some of you may have heard about the Cow Hill buildings. That project has been actually, we received requests for qualifications from developers. It's been discussed with the city councils, and all what I can offer you in saying that we are very, very excited and working with the developer that will be able to put commercial facilities in there as well as market rate apartments. All of that actually spun by the fact that Alvernia College and how we can harness the energy between us and Alvernia College in order to make sure that there is a reciprocal agreement and reciprocal benefits to us. Remember, when Alvernia brings the students there, these students, they need a life and they need amenities to them. So by facilitating all these things, we'll be able to. One of the early projects that we are started on, and I am the executive director for the Reading Redevelopment Authority. We started the concept of public-private partnership. A developer from company SPAC Development Group is actually going to partner with us for the building 301 Washington as well as 124 to put 80 apartments in that area. So we were working together on facilitating all of these things. What I would like to emphasize on here is that the trend, as you will see, and I'll capture on what David had said, that is about 1,200 residential units were actually apartments, the majority of them apartments, and I don't want to misquote you, David, in this one there, but in the city of Reading, in the last year, we have approved close to about 500 units, residential units that are coming into our area. What you are seeing on the screen here is what the plans are going to be for the Reading Eagle And part of that is going to be major entertainment activities. We are still working with the developer on this matter, and we will continue to actually work on plans in order to make sure that we can attract more business owners and make sure that we can see eye to eye with them on these things. This is this housing strategy that I will not take the credit for that. My good friend David Hunter is the one who started it and actually finished. It's not been adopted yet by the city of Reading, but we're working towards incorporating this with the Hailstone Economic Study for the implementation, and that will be coming in the future, in the near future, as a matter of fact. I'm going to stop here, and because what are some of these things, the prioritizations and the interventions are actually the tools that we are using ourselves in there. So what we do, we are not arbitrarily tackling any problems in there. Between the data that we have and the tools that we have, so for instance, we have a software program called Tolomi, or Building Blocks. Using that with actually analyzing the data and finding out how we will be able to incorporate successful missions, how we will be able to revitalize, how we will be able to benefit from facade improvement, sidewalk improvement, and attract more businesses to the area, is exactly where we are going to do this. I'd like to finish by saying, or conclude by saying, that the city of Reading is open for business, big, small, and anywhere in between. Feel free to always come in and visit with us. My colleague Shannon Kalari is here with me, and the credit goes to her. She's the one who prepared the presentation, and thank you, Shannon. I would not take the credit for that at all, but she made me look good. And anyhow, we are really trying to attract businesses, and we are very cognizant on how we will be able to develop the relationship that basically takes you to this graph here, is to understand where the developer would like to be, and that is where we can start our relationship with any developer, is to see where they are.
All right, so we've had a little bit of a change in process here, in that I'm going to stay here and Andrea is actually going to move around the room with the microphone. So really what we're looking for, I really need your notes so I can put the notes together for the report, and you'll all be getting a copy of that. But what I'd like to hear is the salient points that you had in your discussions at your tables. I happen to sit with a number of realtors, and they were talking about the issues that face Berks County and redevelopment and development itself. But I'm interested in where your comments are. There is an opportunity for us to progress this forum if the interest is there and everybody finds value in this. But I know for me, I really enjoyed getting all the information about where we are today and where we have been. And it's something that the CELG, through the Berks Municipal Partnership, is going to be working with. A lot of you are realtors here. Fred Levering is the chairman of the Berks Municipal Partnership, and so we're actually looking at this issue of economic development and the housing needs that we have in Berks County. That's on one side. The other side is we're going to start looking at what the actual cost of doing business in Berks County is, and Jamal talked a little bit about that in the city of Reading, but we're looking at it for the entire county. So anyway, Andrea, you're at a table there. Why don't you hand the mic off to the speaker, and then collect their paper when they're done.
All right. So at our table, we discussed. I have Kumru Township with me, so I'm glad to have them. Made some new friends. So at our table, we talked a little bit about the joint zoning and joint comp plans. So they do have a joint comp plan, but they do not have joint zoning. Kumru has kind of said that joint comp plans are kind of aspirational and work towards bringing everyone together towards the same goals and the same development. Joint plan or joint zoning hopefully could follow after that. But a lot of times they don't want to be told, you don't want to be told necessarily what to put where in your municipality by someone else. let's see. So some other statements. The county's blight review committee is a very helpful tool in terms of covering blight and kind of helping to address and identify blighted properties. So that's been helpful. And then we talked a little bit about some more difficult problems. The chain of title is a big issue. When someone passes away, that title transfers, and I guess it's hard to pinpoint who actually is responsible for that property. Also, absentee landlords can be a very big problem as well. So those are some of the things that we talked about so far with CUMRA.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm really sorry, my notes are not as organized as that. And we don't have just one municipality here, so our conversation kind of went all over the place with different examples, but some common themes that I picked up with various questions, really. When we talked about the idea of denser housing and the mixed housing with the retail, people were definitely up for that idea. That is something that wasn't necessarily talked about before. Also, particularly in Kutztown, with the idea of turning the student housing back into single-family homes is something that's being brought up there. Also, a big theme that was talked about is just the cost to build residential is just very high. And then also it costs more to renovate historical homes than it would be worth with the ROI. So particularly talking about, buildings that are available, but there's a lot of, issues with turning them into something else because of the cost. Oh, yes. Thank you. Also, the property assessment is also a big challenge in multiple areas. So, anything? Assessment. So, I typed my notes, so I will send them to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So at our table, Monica and I are in the health and human service field, so a lot of this may be not so much around technical infrastructure, but just some of our thoughts. One of the first things we talked about was how to address the immediate need of housing. There's literally people homeless today, so how do we get them connected with housing while we're actually doing the planning for the future? How do we make some short-term assistance turn into long-term solutions? And we talked in particular about maybe the ERAP that came out as part of COVID, but how do we make sure that folks are able to continue to afford their rent after the assistance is gone? The need for more jobs in the city, or at least closer to where people are actually living so that they don't have to drive. We discussed that people from the city actually are driving out to where these warehouses are, so how can homes be located where they're actually going to work? How to scale housing development and blight remediation. We talked specifically about the great work that Habitat does, but it isn't on the largest scale to be able to impact as many people as possible. And then we spoke about just block by block revitalization, home repair programs so people can stay in the homes that they do have, and how to increase home ownership where there is a high percentage of rental neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Table 4, Sean.
Good evening, everyone. I am Sean. We have West Reading in the building over here, Wyomissing, Exeter, and the city of Reading. And we had a pretty big consensus, pretty much just saying that in order to address the issues that we have, you need to have a mixture of housing. Not just renting, you need to have more senior homes, you need to have more starter homes, you need to have more rentals, but not just one. One way that we can fix this is, instead of it being public versus private sector, by bridging that and making more public and private partnerships. One way we can also fix this is by inviting, our community stakeholders and our local community leaders to come to the Berks Municipal Partnership meetings more often and joining the CELG. You also can, for that. And
He was an Albright graduate.
and just offering solutions, hearing the issues, and collaborating more. And I'm pretty sure we'll have some solutions in the future.
Thank you.
This table is table no number.
This is the table Paul referred to earlier that's mostly realtors at this table. I don't think we've got a lot to add beyond comments that were already made here. It was interesting to see that, you know, there's really universal enthusiasm here for joint comprehensive planning, also concerns that that planning actually get translated into actual zoning boards and zoning decisions. Also some concerns about transfer taxes potentially cutting down on new development and resales.
All right, we're going to go backwards. We're going to go here to table number 9. Hunter? You can do it, Hunter.
I've been spiked. I was not the one who was taking the notes. Can I steal your notes? Okay. So we tried to really go down, I think, into thinking through some of these questions, especially the first 3 were the ones that we really got through. I think one of the things that we tried to observe a little bit was the challenges with working with these private organizations. Might depend more on the local context. A lot of suburban communities that we were talking about, specifically in Exeter Township's context, may not have as much interest or even much visibility to some of these private partnerships or programs like Habitat for Humanity or NHS, that the resources that they have available may not really be on the radar of the townships. In addition, because there is, I think, maybe less lifespan, or there's more lifespan left on some of the houses that have been built in the last 20 years, and a lot of the suburban communities, there's less interest in it. So because there's less interest, it's not as high of an issue, therefore it's somebody else's problem. And I think, you know, in Exeter's case or in some of the other communities around the city, you know, that's something that the city has to deal with. That's not something that Exeter has to deal with. So I think that was one of the conclusions that we kind of had, is there's a lack of understanding about these issues, and there's a whole bunch of factors that lead into and build onto that, where that fluency on the issue is not there in order to think in a larger context of how does our decision here affect the rest of the county downstream, so to speak. One very unique thought that I had from what Lester said was looking at the number of variances that occur through a number of developers that come in, and looking at your variances to see what the patterns are of what specific parts in your zoning ordinances that people are looking for variances on. And are there outdated regulations associated with those variances, or are there ways that we can update our zoning ordinance to really cater to those needs? And I think one of the other factors that we identified is there's been, I think, a lot of movement towards land preservation, specifically around agriculture and open space preservation. And is that impacting the ability for some of these new housing units and developments to be built if we're at the same time preserving more land that's open and available for this development and no longer making it available for that type of residential development? Is that taking opportunity out and contributing to that factor of NIMBYism that we talked about? Yeah, I think those are some of the cover points. Is there anything else I should add? Okay.
Thank you.
Who do we got at table 7?
One, Doug. Maybe 1.5. So we have pretty much what everybody else was saying too, but bringing people together in a joint plan, a strong leader that communicates well to inform and collaborate, making sure that it's self-sustained and in key locations in order for it to thrive. For it to be in a prime location, because that's pretty much everything. And the missing middle, workforce housing, and to put density in the boroughs. We talked a little bit about number 2, and we mentioned rentals, affordable pieces, a lot of demand and not enough supply, which everyone knows is the issue. And then we talked about municipalities joining, partnering together so that they can consolidate and create better opportunities. That's all we have.
Thank you.
Okay, we talked about a lot of different things, of course. Some of those involve the fact that investors are always looking at trying to get a positive return on their investment, and it seems a lot of times when they're getting properties and trying to keep them in good condition, some of the cities look at that and they try to get them to bring it to maybe like a new construction standard. And often when you're looking at older properties, everything doesn't fit, or the cost to do that actually is too much and it doesn't make sense. The other things we were discussing is the fact that landlords don't always get help when they have issues with landlord-tenant things, but the cities are happy to give them fines when there's problems with their property. So those are some other things that should be addressed. When we're looking at having a comprehensive plan, a lot of the townships could be affected by things that their neighbors doing, and there should be more open dialogue to development. So when we know one of our neighbors are doing something, if it's going to affect our community, there's proper infrastructure, there's proper funding for road development or whatever needs to be done. And the speed for approval seems to be too long for a lot of people who are working on projects, and that's one of the big things. I actually was at one township once, and I know that somebody came in and said, it's been over 18 months and I'm not getting my permits approved, and this is pretty insane. Like, why is this taking so long? So that was from personal experience. Not me, I was at a township meeting when somebody said that. And it says, what we really need is funding and manpower and proper planning, and that's the need for communication throughout the townships, on a county level and on a township level, so everybody can work together and get proper development. So streamlining development near schools and new construction, and having the costs absorbed for water, sewer capacities. So that was it.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, we talked about a lot of different things. The interesting thing is we were surprised at some of the recent activity in the city of Reading. So it's almost like we have to work more jointly, neighborhood housing, habitat, the realtors, because as realtors, there's so much going on that I didn't know. I'm almost embarrassed to say I didn't know it. So yes, more condos, maybe not just rentals. And actually, not exactly on topic, but we thought education in high school for the kids to know what home ownership is and how to afford it and how not to get in a bind down the road. And crime in the city is a problem, and you're bringing people in and doing all this, but people want to be safe. Thank you.
Okay. We talked about the what was it, number 3, which was lack of affordable housing as an impediment to expanding workforce and job opportunities. And kind of the question is, which comes first, the jobs or the housing? We have sections of the county where agriculture precludes development. And there was a comment that maybe infrastructure, transportation in the county is even a bigger impediment to economic development than the housing. We also talked about joint comp plans and talked about the need for open spaces, talked about the issues of regulations and how they increase costs, especially for new development. But then we also talked a little bit about how they can improve housing in floodplains without batting an eye, which seems kind of odd. And that was about it.
I made this comment at the table I was sitting at, and Dave, you can comment after I make it, but I think that Berks County probably has more comprehensive joint planning going on than most counties in Pennsylvania. What we have to do is translate that to joint zoning. And right now, we just don't have that. We have some of it. We have a couple of very successful areas where there's joint zoning. But the comprehensive planning is the first stage, and maybe we need to have those comprehensive plans be 10, 15, 20 years old before people will sit there and say, okay, what are the benefits of doing joint zoning, and maybe we ought to do that. But that's the reality. There are many counties in this Commonwealth that have as many joint comprehensive plans as we have joint zoning, and that's debilitating. It really is. So anyway, having said that, go ahead.
Table 12. The gentlemen I'm sitting with are all with the Berks County Housing Authority and also the Berks County Housing Authority Housing Opportunities, which is a separate nonprofit for creating affordable housing. And so this is a very important tool that we talked about the need to ramp up, scale, and really get aggressive about development. Gwen, your guys are 100% behind you. Where are you? So they've already done a few units, tearing down a dilapidated house, replacing it with a townhouse, making that townhouse available for sale. And now we talked about the idea of using Section 8 vouchers to help people pay their mortgage to buy a home, not just become a permanent renter. And that is allowed by the Housing and Urban Development. So it's a very important tool in many cases to make that leap. It is very difficult to navigate the financial tools, so conversation, cooperation, partnerships, collaborations are really going to be necessary to bridge that gap between the county's got money, the city's got money, PHFA has money, now what? I call it smorgasbord financing. It's not an easy place to navigate. So that was our conversation.
Thank you.
I would like to take the privilege to introduce the president-elect of the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, who came up here from Philadelphia. His wife attended Albright, and I would like him to tell us what are they doing in Philadelphia and how they've been so successful. So he's going to share the report on my behalf.
I guess that puts me on the hot seat. Yeah, my name's Al Perry, and yeah, I didn't attend Albright, but I married Albright, so I traded up. I'm a Temple guy, so don't hold it against me. So we work with a lot of these initiatives in our brokerage. So of course, Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, affordable and attainable housing is always an interest topic that we discuss frequently. But it's something that's near and dear to my heart because at our brokerage, it's something that we've tried to kind of tear down the walls as much as we can to do that development. And I love that you mentioned the Section 8 vouchers. We work with those quite a bit. Tenants can get Section 8 vouchers. It's not every Section 8 tenant that can get them, but some of the, Section 8 has a voucher program within that will allow for tenants to apply for, housing credit. And they work, and the most recent one we did was with PNC Bank. So that was, PNC Bank gave them the mortgage money. It's a little more. There's an extra inspection involved, so you have a property inspection, and then you also have the housing quality standards inspection. So the owner's got to be a little more adept to be cooperative with repairs and things of that nature. Basically, it's the Section 8 inspection that you would have in a tenant situation. So, but we the thing that I thought was really is density. Like one of the things we always see is private. We always talk about public money coming to affordable housing, and there's only so much of it. So how do you get private money into affordable housing? And sometimes you'll see that the developers are being encouraged to do maybe 10% or 5% affordable, and 90% market rate if it's a bigger project. But in Philadelphia, and I imagine in Reading as well, you got so many small scattered site undeveloped properties or underdeveloped properties that it would make for a great opportunity for private money to come in. And one of the things we've worked with some of our developers is having a higher density, like to be able to go to the city and say, hey, maybe we can put 3 units in here, do condominiums, and we can get private money to sell, 3 units at $225,000 versus, 1 unit at $600,000, and make it more affordable, and you could, if it's a bigger parcel. So we just did a few of those, and where we could get the city to donate some land for this type of affordable housing. So it kind of keeps the cost down for acquisition, because they understand the developer is going to develop it private with their own private money. They're not going to ask for, subsidy, but they did get the land from the city. So just kind of a cool thing. So we kind of ran through the project, ran through this, but I really, that density thing, if we could work with that, the ability to create some more density, if it opens more doors to people who need a place to live, that's great. And then that's the other thing is, is this for home ownership versus renters? Because right now renters are getting crushed in the marketplace. There's nothing you can rent affordably that's out there. So, how do you go ahead and make things that's a whole nother subject, because a lot of the landlords are selling because they can cash dividend checks, because a lot of the rental situations have gotten so difficult to evict, especially through COVID. I'm guessing you're a landlord. You had a couple landlord hearts. Yeah, so it's been really hard for landlords. So some of the landlords have said, well, the market's good, let's cash in the chips, and it's lowering the affordable housing opportunities for the tenants. And so there's a lot of those folks. I don't know that I have the answers to that, but if, a cooperative through that eviction process, I think it would be great. Maybe landlords wouldn't be so hesitant to be landlords if they knew that when they did get a bad actor, or, because sometimes it's not just about their inability to pay. Some people choose not to pay. And if you have one of those, that there be an expeditious process to get rid of them. But when you have them for a long time, it makes it more difficult. So just that cooperative effort between public and private, I think, would be wonderful. We don't always have to be enemies. So, but thank you. Thanks for putting me on the spot, Merlin.
So I just have to say, I'm part of Albright College. I'm not a professor here like Kennan, but what you have heard tonight is you have a bunch of alumni that are here tonight. And then you even have an alumni that's coming up from Philadelphia to come back to the college. So if you know of kids that are thinking about where they want to go to school or what they're doing, or you have them yourself, think about Albright and know that after 4 years, based on the food you had tonight, that they're going to be well fed. And they'll be happy with that part of their educational process. So thank you. Fred, you get to wrap it all up.
Hardly. We have, our table is represented by Spring Township, Maiden Creek Township, and Wyomissing Borough, so we're pretty diverse. But it was notable that there's so many similar sort of issues, and it really highlights one of the important things about the Center for Excellent Local Government, in that in bringing municipalities together, you find that you have more similar issues than divergent ones, and you can accomplish more. And I want everybody in the room here to know that the center is very, very unique in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I don't think there's any other county that can boast an organization like this where municipal people come together. There's nearby counties, as Paul well knows because he worked there and stuff, that municipalities don't talk to each other, and I think that we've really accomplished something interesting here. But having said that, one of the things that you've got to pay close attention to is working with your local school district. One of the problems that we've faced in Wyomissing is getting cooperation from the 2 school districts that are part of the borough to work together on things like tax incentives and whatnot, LERTAs and so on. It seems like school board members are not always as up to speed on how those things work. So you need to establish a working relationship with your school district and make sure that you both understand what is in front of us. There's been a lot of changes in use over the very accelerated in recent years, but Maiden Creek found the same sort of thing where an area that was residential was kind of turning into a commercial thing, and it's not as well thought through as they would like it to be, so they're creating an overlaid district kind of thing. We've done a couple of overlays in Wyomissing Borough as well to try to adapt the zoning to what the current needs are. So keep an open mind is my advice. I've always said that if some developer comes to Wyomissing with a good idea, we'll find a way to make it work. I mean, don't get too hung up on the fact that that's not what it says in the rule book. The rule books were made to be changed, I think. We have some very interesting challenges. The Berkshire Mall isn't quite what it used to be, you may have noticed. And with the pandemic changing the way we work, office space, which we have a lot of, is under a lot of pressure now with work from home and that sort of downsizing thing of office spaces. The retail thing with what Amazon did to it, and then the pandemic, I don't know that it's ever going to be the same. So changing uses of those structures, what are you going to do with the mall, is a big challenge for us. Fortunately, we have a very strong relationship with neighboring municipalities. We work closely with West Reading, and we work closely with Spring, and I think together we can find ways to make sure that we make the best use of those things as time goes by. So it's a challenging thing. Make sure you speak with your school districts and have them involved. Another challenge for us is the Reading Hospital. I mean, the Reading Hospital has been under some financial stress and seems to be making a lot of progress and so on, but they have a lot of properties out there, and right now the new facilities that they have in, for instance, at the knitting mills in Wyomissing it's all available for sublease right now. They'll do whatever they have to do to work out their finances, but that might leave us on the short end of a stick. So we have to be very mindful of that and be working closely with them. So it's, I just always think back to when I was in a long time ago in junior high school, I had a science teacher, Harry Manderbach, and he said, "Remember, we live in a changing world." And he sure as hell was right. So
I think there are a lot of people here who are not directly involved in local government in their jobs, and I deal with that on a daily basis because of my career and my job. I think all of you probably need to know that Berks County has more cooperation among its municipalities than all of the municipalities around Philadelphia and around Allentown, and that says a lot. York County has a lot of cooperation. We have more regional and regional police departments, regional fire departments than I think anywhere other than York with their regional police departments. We have all kinds of joint recreational programs and so on. I did my entire career around Philadelphia in Montgomery County, Bucks County, Chester County, and Delaware County, and you can count on less than one hand the amount of regional police departments that are there. And that's an area that could really run some dramatic police operations if they would just get a couple of communities together. Fire is going to be an issue you're going to hear about. We run off this basic volunteer system that in 1970 had over 300,000 volunteers. This past year, we're down to 37,000 volunteers. And that means that a lot of municipalities are not turning out fire services when the bell rings. So the fact that we have as many regional responses is really a testament to local government in Berks County. And I can say that because I didn't serve in Berks County, but I love it here because I talked about doing regional work in my career, and man, it was tough. If the managers didn't do it themselves quietly, it didn't get done. And here, our local officials embrace it. So is there any other questions? A little bit of an editorial comment. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm just going to put two little commercials in here for the League of Women Voters. Next Tuesday night, and this is also for BCTV, next Tuesday night, 8 p.m., BCTV and the League will have a program on passenger rail service from Reading to Philly and back with guests Commissioner Leinbach and John Whitehammer. So try to watch it if you can. And there's membership forms for the league up front if you want to join. Oh, and thank you to John and Andrea for a job, Paul and Andrea for a job well done.
Well, it goes without saying that if we had not had the partnership with our sponsors and also with our bar and the league, this wouldn't have happened tonight. So look for our communications with you with the PowerPoints and the summary of the comments, and then we'll go from there. Whether we a couple years ago when the chicken farming was really blossoming in Berks County, and I'm coming from an area that didn't have any chicken farms, and I had to learn really quickly what it was all about because we had hundreds here in Berks County. We did Chicken Farming 101. And so now we'll look at Housing 102. We'll call this Housing 101, and we'll look at Housing 102. So with that, thank you very much for coming tonight. I hope you found it useful. See you soon. Thank you. Yes.